We're often asked the question, how big should a missional community be? And those are important questions because there's a lot of logistics when you think about trying to mobilize a group of people on mission. What we've found is that when you start a group, you're going to want, at least from my experience, at least hopefully 6 adults that are pretty committed to the mission. You could probably do 4. I would strongly discourage you to get any less than that because it can really be taxing, especially if it's like a husband and wife trying to carry the leadership of a group all by themselves. What often happens is then we end up reproducing the old model, which is you just have a couple leaders that do everything for everyone, and it will burn them out eventually. I think that's actually why we even see a lot of leaders in churches experience burnout, is because they're trying to carry the weight of the mission all on their shoulders. So it's great if you can have 4 to 6 sharing it together, maybe 3 couples or several singles and a couple working together on mission. And when I say that number, I mean that's like a core number. Those are the people that, they're devoted to one another, they're devoted to this mission, they're willing to make the really hard decisions to reorient all of their life for the sake of this mission field. You may not be able to find a lot more than that at the beginning because most people are going to have to be discipled into that kind of living. And so to get 4 to 6 who really are going to do that is usually a pretty big deal. But if you can, which I recommend you do, then I'd encourage that those people devote themselves to forming what this mission is going to look like, how they're going to get on mission in the everyday life, how they're going to begin to order their lives together, who they're going to pull in with them, how they're going to help disciple the others that are going to kind of be that next layer, which is likely going to be some Christians who want to get on mission, but probably won't be able to be as fully devoted as maybe that core is. And that group will be part of the discipleship plan of the group. A lot of times people think, well, it's only discipling the people who don't yet know Christ. No, really, you're discipling all those people that you're leading to reach the people who don't know Christ, because that's part of the goal, is you're training them up in how to be disciple makers. And so then you're talking probably about 10 to 12 probably. That's a good starting point. If you make it a lot bigger than that, then likely what you'll find is you'll have a massive group of Christians that don't have any time for any more relationships because they're just trying to figure out how to be with each other, that they don't have any time to be with people who don't yet know Christ. And so I discourage them getting much bigger than that, especially at the starting point, because if you've got 20 to 30 people already that are Christians, you're probably not going to spend much time with people who don't yet know Jesus. So it's good to have that feel like we've got to go reach some people. We've got to go meet some people. We're kind of small right now. And so we found that actually creates a good sense of urgency to get out and get to know people and reach out and serve them. So those are some size pieces. Now here's the thing that I've also want to recommend. As you think about your size, don't count all the people that you're going to reach as those numbers, because you're going to find as you start reaching out to people, you might have 30, 40, even 50 different people that you're trying to reach as a missional community. So you're going to have to differentiate between those who are really core and those who are probably Christians really committed and those who are the people you're actually trying to reach. And you can have a pretty large number of people you're trying to reach because it's going to take you a while to get some significant traction with a few of those people in that larger crowd. So maybe even think, who's the crowd, who's the core, who are the committed, and who's the crowd as we think about even defining our missional community numbers. Now, as you experience this, you're going to find that having a large number of children is going to lead to some logistical challenges. And we love our kids. We want them on mission with us. We want them involved in the mission. And of course, a missional community isn't just a weekly event, but you will have weekly events. You will have events where you get them together. And so having more and more kids may lead you to wrestle with how big can we really get with a lot of families with young kids. That may limit your size. You're going to have to take that into consideration, because when you start seeing 10, 12, 15 kids in a household altogether, that's a lot of work just discipling them. So you'll have to think through that implication. It's nice if you can have a few families with small kids with a whole lot of people who don't have young kids, because they can all pitch in together and help. So think through that as you're thinking through your size challenges as well. Another thing to factor into your determination of size is the place in which you find yourself in. For instance, in many urban contexts, people are living in very cramped quarters in an apartment or a condo, and you're just not going to be able to fit a whole lot of people in those. And so who knows, maybe you'll have a bigger missional community, but you might have to determine, when we have meetings, we might have to be in 2 or 3 different places and share that leadership in different locations if we can't yet multiply and start new groups. But you are going to have to factor the size of the place you live in. So in a suburban context, you can probably get a lot bigger. in a warmer climate, you can do a lot more outside. There's just going to be different factors like that you're going to have to pay attention to. Now, here's another thing that I think it's important to pay attention to, and that is just social space, like true social space. There are realities about people doing certain things at a very small size, like what they call intimate space, and then there's kind of this personal space, which can often be 12 to 20, and then there's this social space, which is oftentimes can be 20 to 50, and then you've got this much bigger public space, like going to a big sporting event. Those are real sociological facts that you've got to take into consideration when you plan what you're doing, because you may want to do some big events with several missional communities together that's going to be big public space. But you're also going to find times you need to have much more personal space or social space depending on what you're trying to accomplish. So think through those things. For instance, I've watched some groups try to have intimate space with 30 people, and they have one person confessing a struggle with pornography, and they're going through all this stuff to help this guy get over pornography. That's probably not the best place to work through that issue. You might need to have 3 or 4 guys getting together with him on a weekly basis, which we call a DNA group, to help work through the real issues of his heart on a more intimate level. So think through real social space. That's just a reality you got to face in the culture we live in as people feel more comfortable doing certain things in different spaces. Now, as you grow, I've seen some groups get really, really big, and then they just split the group and they call it multiplication. Let's be clear, if you know your mathematics, that's not multiplication, that's called division. And there may be reasons why you might have to say, this is too big, let's break it up into 2 groups. But be careful you don't necessarily call that multiplication if you actually haven't made disciples and you haven't raised up leadership and you haven't sent out leadership to start something new. That's not truly multiplication. Just like if my family has more and more kids because of my wife and I's fruitfulness, but my kids never grow up and start their own family, we haven't actually multiplied families. We've just multiplied babies. And so we want to see multiplication of disciple-making disciples, which means when we look at our missional community, we want to start from the beginning with the expectation that we're going to train up some to eventually lead others to go on mission, either in the place we're at, maybe we just start another missional community to the place we're at, or to a new place where they're sent to, and they have the ability and the strength to start up a new group. Some of the things that I've learned that are helpful in that process is, first of all, starting with the end in mind. Make sure you tell your group that's where you're going. We want to eventually see some of you grow up into maturity. We want to train you to be leaders, and we want to be able to send you out with a group of people to start a new missional community. That's one of our goals. We want to state that very clearly so it's not a surprise to you when it happens. Second, by stating that, we're going to be held accountable to actually put in place mechanisms to actually train you up. So we're going to start to share leadership as you grow into maturity, so you start to experience leading this group before we send you out to lead a new group. So that's going to put in place a need for training, a need for leadership development. Then third, I've found that it's helpful to begin to identify who you think those people might be at some point to the group, because then the group can give you feedback right away on whether they would follow their lead. And if right away people go, no, I don't think you're ready, I don't trust you, then we can protect them from prematurely appointing them to something that they're not yet ready for. And then I've used a test for seeing if they really have leadership and have the character and have the vision. I'll take a group of men and women that say they want to start a new missional community, and I'll let them communicate that to the rest of the group and say, this is who we think we want to reach, and we'd like to take the next month to have you meet with us. And I instruct them to do that, to kind of let the group know we're going to be going at some point to start this new group. Would you like to meet with us and talk to us about it? If you're interested in following our lead into this new work, we'd like to meet with you. And I give them usually about a month to have those meetings. And then at the end of that month, I've taken those people who've expressed interest in starting a new group and said, at this night, we're going to set you apart in one part of our house, and everybody who wants to go with you is going to go to that part of the room, and they're going to start talking to you about forming this new missional community covenant of how you're going to reach those people together. If no one follows you into the room, you're not ready yet. If you haven't been able to recruit anybody to it, if no one trusts you enough to follow your leadership, if your character is not strong enough that anybody would submit to you, then we need to hold back and do some more work. I've seen churches make mistakes in appointing people to start new groups, but nobody wants to follow them, and then they just force people into those groups to follow them, and from the very beginning, it undermines the very leadership of the group because nobody really trusted them in the first place. So I want to have a time of testing where I can see if people would follow their leadership, and then if they're not ready, it allows me to train them better for the next season to prepare them to be ready to leave the next time we put them up. When a group starts to have a certain number of adults that are mature, that are effective in making disciples, let's say the group grows from 6 core to 12 core or 14 core, that's a good time to really seriously consider getting them ready to be sent out. Because if you wait too long, then what happens is it in some ways stagnates that growth that they're growing up into. It's like the teenager you have in your house where he's ready to leave. You can tell. He's wanting independence. He's wanting to make decisions on his own. But mom and dad are going like, no, and we don't let you make any decisions until you're on your own. And so what ends up happening is he's 28 years old and he's still not growing up because mom and dad are stagnating that kid's growth because they're so afraid of him failing. So I've found a lot of times groups will start growing and you look at their group and you're looking at them going, you guys have like 4 or 5 or 6 pretty solid believers in your group that if just given the opportunity and the right training and the right mentoring and coaching, you got to kind of push. If you push them out of the nest, they'd probably start to fly. But you're holding them back. You're keeping them from growing in their ability to make disciples. And I love how Jesus sends out his disciples, not when they're perfect, but when they're prepared enough. And then what happens is they get out on a mission and they learn where they really weren't prepared, where they still need to grow. And then they come back and he trains them more in the midst of their leadership, in the midst of their mission. And as a group starts to get to the size where you've got a few leaders like that, you're going to want to get them out to start beginning to lead so they can start to test the development they've been experiencing and see where they're lacking. And then train them up more. Now, here's a key. Don't miss this. If you send people out to start new missional communities, but you don't provide ongoing coaching and ongoing care and ongoing training, you'll send them out to learn, but they'll have no process time to work on where they're not strong yet. And so you want to get them out, but you want to get them out with good covering, good protection, good mentoring, good development along the way. There are going to be situations where you're going to see a group grow really fast. You might have an evangelist as a leader or a very charismatic leader, and everybody wants to get around them. And you're going to realize, man, we can't keep doing this. It's just too big. It's unwieldy. It's hurting people because it's so big. And you may have to actually multiply that out with a young leadership. Just if you do, you're going to have to give a lot of mentoring and coaching and covering for that. And I've seen some cases where that strong charismatic leader just meets in both groups. So they might go, okay, we're gonna break this up into 2 groups. I'm gonna every other week go to one group, then the other group, and keep mentoring you and training you. But we need to break this up into smaller groups that are a lot more manageable for the development for everyone in the group to experience. So you may have to think through creative solutions as the group gets bigger, whereas you allow them to get smaller so they can focus on development, but still receive the kind of training they need. If you got a highly charismatic leader, oftentimes they have the capability to do that anyway. It's just that the mechanism of the size and the limitations of the house are going to prevent them from being very effective. So they may need to break it up into 2 groups in order to be more effective in leading that group forward. And then make sure that they're very intentional about identifying future leadership and putting extensive time into those people. A lot of times groups grow super fast, but they didn't put a lot of extra time in the few that could probably lead them. So in that shift, you're going to have to make extra space like in the morning or extra nights here and there, or maybe extended day or afternoon once a month where you really give a lot of extra time to those emerging leaders so that you can kind of fast track their development towards being able to lead eventually.